raise the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road Truth listeners. Today I have Richard White. He is a founder and CEO of Fathom.video. You know, it's probably a word that can be a little bit negative, a little positive in this COVID day of Zoom, and it's making Zoom a little bit easier. Thank you, Richard, for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So how would you describe, I guess, yourself and Fathom? Like, is there a way to describe it in a kind of elevator pitch?
I sure hope so. Basically, if you're on a lot of Zoom calls, like I think most of us are, and you're kind of frustrated with trying to take notes while having a conversation, Fathom is built to kind of solve that problem. We automatically record, transcribe, and give you a way to highlight the important parts of your call. And it's kind of great. It like allows you to kind of focus on the conversation, write your notes later, but also be able to do cool things like share a portion of your call with your teammate or with the client, right? Here's what I heard. Here's a 30-second clip from my Zoom call you can share around. And honestly, I feel like that's sometimes what was always missing at working in my last company is I'd have these great conversations and then I'd share my notes with someone. And not only were those notes kind of like frustrating and stressful to make on the fly, but they never really were as like impactful as like that customer quote or, you know, that team member saying that thing firsthand. And so now we can kind of capture those moments and share them with our team.
Now, with Fathom, I mean, when did that idea, I guess, come about?
About 2 months before the pandemic. So kind of like, you know, January 2020, I was working at my last startup that I started and I was doing a lot of user research, doing a lot of customer calls. I think I did like 300 customer calls in like a month and on like all on Zoom. And I was rapidly trying to take notes and we were actually working on something else. And I was like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time on the call, stressing out, trying to like take these notes, cleaning up these notes after the call. And then I show these notes to my team and my team is like, cool, whatever, right? It just kind of fell flat. And so we were working on something else. That's like, this is a bigger problem than what we're kind of working on. And so that's when we kind of, quickly kind of coalesced around that idea of Fathom and launched it about 6 to 8 months later.
Nice. Well, let's rewind. Who was young Richard? Was young Richard into technology? Who was young Richard?
Yeah, young Richard was into entrepreneurship. I think I would say the first startup I had was selling pictures to students in my first classroom for like 5 cents a picture, like mazes and stuff. So I think in high school I sold like mixtapes and fake Oakleys to my to other folks in high school. And so always had that kind of entrepreneurship, but I also had a very technical background. So I was computer science in college, and before that I did a lot of like network IT type stuff even in high school.
Oh, okay. So you have that entrepreneurial mindset. You're kind of selling things. Going to school, was your goal to actually build your business, or what was the idea after high school?
I actually think kind of right after college, I was actually kind of burned out on entrepreneurship. I grew up in North Carolina, and I felt like it was kind of going against the grain. I kept trying to get my friends to do startups with me, and no one really wanted to do that. Everyone wanted to go work at like IBM, and so and it was admittedly like probably a better option to go work at IBM than work on some crazy idea with me. And so I kind of was actually burned out on it. And I very, very luckily fell into a solution where I ended up working with, I kind of like randomly cold emailed this startup that was building something I wanted to build. And it went from me just kind of giving them advice to working with them full time. And they happened to be in the first batch of this thing called Y Combinator, which is now one of the biggest seed funding kind of incubator tech programs in the world for tech companies. And so that kind of got me back into the world of entrepreneurship. But yeah, it was kind of it's kind of a winding path. Like I kind of had given up on the entrepreneurship path until I found this other group of pocket of people and fell into that again.
Okay, well, let's jump into that. So how did you find this group of people, and what was that initial email that you sent to them?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was working, because at this point I had kind of put entrepreneurship on the shelf, and I was just working a day job as a programmer at a company, and I think talking a lot about products I wanted to build on the side, or I thought it'd be cool to build. And one of my colleagues was like, "Oh, look at this TechCrunch article. Someone built one of the things you wanted to build." And I was like, really kind of bummed, right? You're kind of like, and then I had it, and I was like, oh wow, this is like a very technically impressive product, but the design is very bad. And I actually had aspirations to get into design, product design. And so I just cold emailed them and it was like, your product is technically very impressive, but the design is very bad. But then I like followed that up with, I would love to help you. Right. And to their credit, they were like, I think they later told me this is like one of the weirdest emails they had received, but they were like, okay, these guys offering help for free. And I sent them a few things and I don't think they really understood what I was trying to communicate. And eventually I sent them like, here's a mock-up of how your product could be better. And they were really impressed by that. And then we ended up working together. And again, that kind of like, that moved me from North Carolina to work up in Boston, which was more like a tech hub. And these guys had all gone to like, I think they all went to Yale. So it's funny. We went from kind of working this company, this like kind of day job to working with the startup, working at this incubator in Boston. The company I worked on wasn't very successful. Like we ended up selling that company on eBay. It was like not to eBay, like literally the company was sold on eBay. But the guys I worked with went on to do this thing called Twitch, which your viewers might be familiar with. So I worked with the founders of Twitch on the product before Twitch, unfortunately not on Twitch. And we shared the office in Boston with a company I'm sure everyone will heard of, which is Reddit. And so Reddit started in the same room as Kiko, which was the predecessor to Twitch. And so you talk about falling into the right group of people there. That was very fortunate, like a very fortunate email, and very fortunate that it didn't get marked as spam, and they actually opened it, and a whole bunch of very fortunate events right there transpired.
Now, okay, so you tell them basically you like the product, you think it can go better, and then you tell them that you'll work for free to give them some insight.
Basically, yeah.
And then now you get your foot in the door. When does the point, because I bet you people listening right now that have the aspirations to join with a company, how long do you give it until you actually go, hey, I need to get paid a little bit?
It's funny. I think I was still have to keep my day job, and just in the evenings I was doing work for them, and I just wanted to be involved. I wanted to help create this thing, and I think what they sent them, like probably 3 months in, or maybe 2 months in, where I sent them the mock-up they got really excited about. They're like, do you want to join the team? And I was like, sure. And then they're like, what do you want to get paid? I was like, whatever you're getting paid. Wrong answer, by the way, because they were paying themselves like nothing. So I was like, yeah, that's great. Right. And so I think I want to say we were paying ourselves like, I don't know, $1,700 a month type thing. Like, this is like 10, 15 years ago, but still that's still not a lot. Right. So
Boston too, right? That's like,
and so like, it was pretty poverty there. But yeah, so I probably should have asked them to get paid a bit more, but it was very much a labor of love. And I was just like super enthralled with like working on this problem. And frankly, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because, even though the company didn't work out, the fact that it sold on eBay for $250,000 ended up being this like real like flashpoint. Like I think the tech press in general made fun of us. Like the first half of that week, it was a 1 week auction on eBay. And the first half of the week, everyone was like, look at these bozos, right? Like selling their company on eBay. And then it sold for $250,000. And then people were like, oh my gosh, is this like future of M&A? And what was really good about that is people generally liked the design I made. And then they knew that I was on this, it was a 3-person team, and visibility from that company really blowing up. Like and blowing up, I mean, not in a fun way, but blowing up and like, burning down, right? But in a very public kind of way.
Now you're with the company, you're basically making peanuts. What happens next?
Yeah, so we worked with them for like 8 months. We then sold the company on eBay, and then I went into kind of like I said, I got all these inbound leads for people like, hey, I've got this product that's not very well designed either. Can you help me with that? And so then I started making a decent amount of money. Actually, I think was making I was charging like $100 an hour or $150 an hour or something. And so I had this like decent little kind of freelancing career for I don't know, probably about a couple of years, and along the way, I met some other tech folks and whatnot, but I always had I think at that point it had reignited this passion for entrepreneurship and for building tech products. And now I'd been connected with people that actually do 1 and 2 startups, right? Unlike a lot of folks I grew up with. So I did freelancing for a couple of years, and then I started my next company. Well, I should actually say I got offered to work with the guys that turned into Twitch, and I turned them down because if you know the history of Twitch, it was originally a thing called Justin TV, which was my friend Justin I worked with Justin and Emmett on this thing Kiko that we sold on eBay, but it was Justin wearing a camera on his head. Like it was live streaming his life for like, 24/7 or ish. And I was like, I'm a product designer. There's really not a design problem here. And so instead of working on that, I started working on this company called Uservoice, which was a platform for product feedback. You can think of it as like Reddit for customer feedback was like the right way to do it. And there's a lot of versions of it now, like the various, like, vote up other people's feedback and like what are the top sort of things. But started that company after doing like 2 years of freelancing. And it was quite the ride. I did that company for 12 years, but the first, I think, 18 months, I spent half of it like living out of my car because I, again, had no money and was just kind of, we're doing whatever we could to make the company survive.
So living out of your car, trying to survive, trying to make this going. I mean, at that point in time when you're living in your car, what was holding you back from not just getting a 9 to 5 job or doing more of that freelance work that was paying you $100 an hour?
I think in the early days of User Voice, there were like 3 of us on the team. And at times I did take freelance jobs on the side and just like to pay everyone salaries, right? To like, and like pay, to keep the other guys that couldn't freelance, like working and pushing the product forward. I don't know. I think I was just stubbornly committed to this idea. I just, we built out the idea relatively quickly. We tested it really quickly and we just got really excited about it. I think in a matter of months and was like, this needs to exist in the world. I think it's something every app is going to want to have, is some way to get a lot of customer feedback very quickly. And I don't know, I'm probably overly persistent, right? Like, compared to some of my peers. And I just, was like, I think also the other thing is 2 of the most impactful things in my entrepreneurship journey. One was this freelancing stuff that I did, because it meant that I knew I always could fall back on that if things got really bad, right? Like I always had some marketable skills. But frankly, this journey of, I was dating a woman at the time, and like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months into starting User Voice, she was like, you probably won't notice that I'm gone, but I'm leaving, because I was just like working all the time. And like, she had all the stuff. And so that's how I kind of like took her car and then like couch surfed and went down the car. And it was a little jarring at first, but honestly, after a little while, it was actually kind of nice. And there was like this like clarity of focus, because I don't have anything else going on in my life. I didn't have like a social life. I didn't have like upkeep on an apartment. I just kind of like, I had to figure out whose couch I was going to crash on, but otherwise I just had my laptop and I worked. And I think it also reminded me that like, I don't need a lot, right? Like I can, and I think it didn't feel as arduous probably as it sounds, because I was like, well, I always have this fallback plan in freelancing, and this couch surfing thing isn't terrible. I don't want to do it for years, but I can get by if that's what it takes to get this thing off the ground.
How long did you have to do that for?
I think probably about 10 months, 9 or 10 months.
Okay. So is that kind of about the time that your company or that company was starting to get some success?
Yeah. So I think the first 3 or 4 months of User Voice, we raised a little money, enough to bring on some folks on the team. And then that money evaporated. And there was that 9 and 10 month, like kind of desert, if you will. We had to transit. And I was like hustling on the side, cut down my burns, like I lived very minimally. And then it turned out that like, User Voice, our conviction was somewhat well warranted, because we actually had really high growth. And I think it was about 10 months later where we raised our first seed round, and we raised, I think, close to $1 million. And then it was like, okay, great, we can like get an apartment and like, and then we still, I think, based the team out of my apartment for like another year. So, we didn't go full, WeWork, right? We were still pretty thrifty here. But at least it gave us cushion. It was like, okay, there's something happening here. People are investing us, and I can probably, get a permanent residence with a mailing address again.
When with that company did you feel like it was successful? Was it when the seed money, or was it later on after that, or when do you kind of feel this starting to get successful?
I think it was somewhere probably a year or 2 after the seed money when we started making our own revenue, right? And I think first year we gave away the product for free. Right at the end of that first year is when we raised that seed money. And then we went from like, 0 to $1 million in revenue in the next year. And then from, I think, 1 to 2.5 from there. And so I think by the time we got to that, once I realized like, oh, like now if you just took your hands off the wheel, the car would keep going, right? Like that's when I felt like, okay, this thing is at least some modicum of success. It's not maybe the success I yet want it to be, but it's some growing concern.
Now you're growing the business. What happens next?
There's uservoice interesting. I ran that company for 12 years, which in Silicon Valley time is like, decades, eons, right? Like I think most of my peers did 3 to 4 companies in that time period. But it was very interesting. I think that company had a lot of different twists and turns, right? And our core stayed the same. We were always focused on how do we make it easy for companies to understand feedback from their customers at like scale. But we took some detours. And so, I probably over the course of those 12 years, at some point ran every department in that company. I think I ran the sales team at one point. I ran the marketing team at one point. I ran obviously the engineering team, the product team. And so in some ways, I feel like that company was like my finishing school for tech entrepreneurship, where I got to understand enough about every discipline to be dangerous. And I remember that I had my mindset here was every year at the end of the year, I'd ask myself 2 questions. Am I uniquely qualified to like run this company and, move it forward? And is this company uniquely qualified to teach me something I don't know already? And near the end of my tenure, I started saying no to one of those questions. And so I started thinking about other options. And like I said, actually, one of the ways I solved that is like we started thinking about building new products at my last company. I took a small team and we were working on new products. And that's how we actually got halfway into building this new product. And that's when I stumbled on the idea for Fathom. I was like, oh, this is a really big idea, but this is bigger than the scope of this company. We should go start a whole new company on this and focus on this full time because there's just a lot of legs to it.
So you have the company, you have a new idea. It's not going to basically be the same company. So do you sell that company and get the proceeds to start the new company, or what happens there?
Yeah, thankfully we had a pretty good, by the end of my tenure, we had a pretty good like management team in place at that company. And so I had already actually kind of, at least in practice, if not in title, taken a step back and elevated some of these other folks to, almost like a GM type title, like to run the business. And I got to kind of, without leaving the company, without giving up yet the CEO title, I got to watch who is now the CEO of uservoice kind of do that role, right? And gave me a lot of confidence. Like, great, like this person has some great ideas and actually probably even better than me, is like very well equipped to run this business going forward. And so I stepped back to kind of more of a board relationship with that company and elevated some of the existing executive management into now being the executive management of the company.
So I'm guessing now you're starting your second company. You're probably getting some sort of income or some kind of money in your pocket. You're not having to sleep in your car when Fathom comes around.
Yeah, though I ended up doing that anyways. I'm not sure. Like, So this time it looks similar. It's a slightly higher class version of what I was doing last time. Now I live out of like Airbnbs and like friends' houses because my friends now have like houses with guest rooms and stuff, which they didn't, 15 years ago. So yeah, it's honestly the second time around, I often describe Fathom compared to uservoice. Fathom feels like I'm playing a video game I played, many years ago, but I vaguely remember like, oh, the good sword is in this castle and the good shield is in this dungeon. It feels like I'm speed running startups a little bit because now I'm starting with the benefit of one, I've got a network of people to hire, a network of people to raise money from, but also I just know all the levers to pull. I think one of the hardest parts of uservoice, or like most people, I think initial entrepreneurship journey is it's so open-ended, right? It's like being dropped into like Minecraft. Like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I, I've watched the videos online of people building these giant castles in Minecraft. Like, well, how do I get there? Right. And so now I feel like I know the levers and the tools and stuff to pull. And so certainly it's a much easier path the second time around here.
Starting Fathom, did you have a significant other that you were with at the start of Fathom?
I did actually.
Did the same thing happen?
The same thing happened. So this might be a lesson learned too, of like, early stage startups are very anathema to solid quality relationships. That also might just be me. So you can bring on all my ex-girlfriends on the next podcast so we can see what they think.
Do you think, I mean, starting if you ever start a third startup, is there something that you could do differently to have that balance of personal life and business, or is it just kind of the way startups usually work, is you kind of have to fully be focused on it?
I mean, I think, I do think, there's ways. I mean, I think this time around it did look different. I mean, last time around with uservoice, I would, go to bed, like fall asleep on my laptop. Like I would literally sit at my laptop. I would be writing code until I like passed out, and then I'd wake up and just like start writing code again. Um, I'd have to do that this time around. It was a much more, you know, much saner version of this, right? I had a team from the beginning that could write code. We were doing things, but you know, I think uservoice, I work 7 days a week.
Mm.
Fathom, I think I started off having weekends, right, and had a great team underneath me and things like that. So I think there are, especially with the benefit of success and better networks, a way to do that sustainable. You don't have to do my method of burn every midnight candle. And I think it just so happened that also starting this company coincided with, this crazy pandemic thing where you're locked indoors with your significant other. And so I think, maybe if it hadn't been for being locked in a 1-bedroom apartment with my significant other and starting a company, that might have been the bridge too far, right? Maybe next time we'll make sure not to start one during a pandemic, and we'll have better outcomes. We'll see.
Something you talked about was the idea that the second go around, now you have a network of people that you can kind of call on either to hire or for seed money. I mean, for maybe someone listening that's looking to start a startup, I mean, is there an avenue, or is it just strictly networking to find the right people to talk to maybe find seed money?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain organizations like Y Combinator, which I mentioned I kind of worked in the first batch of this, and actually with Fathom, we went through Y Combinator, even though I had a decent network. You know, think a lot of ways. Y Combinator does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is try to bootstrap you with a network of people, right? It gives you some social accreditation, saying like, hey, look, we vetted these guys or girls or people and said they're pretty good, and put you in front of a bunch of investors, right? And that's a great hack, because otherwise it is a lot of work, right? And honestly, fundraising to me is like a mini game inside of the video game, right? It's like in between the levels loading, it asks you to play this little puzzle game, and that's fundraising. And so, you can get really good at fundraising, and it doesn't really matter because you're not good at the main game. And so it's really hard to, I think, organically build out a big network to do fundraising from. And so I think you're better off just going to it doesn't have to be Y Combinator, but Y Combinator is probably the biggest one, followed by a Techstars or some of these other accelerators that will connect you with folks like that. So you can focus on being good at whatever your business is, and they can teach you how to play the mini game that is fundraising.
Well, talking about this being, kind of being a game, right? Is who was the big boss? Who was the tough one, or the tough situation that you've had to kind of work through to get to where you are currently?
I mean, I think I think also you can match the product, and the risk of the product to your network and your capabilities, right? So User Voice was a product we built in 2 months. It wasn't actually technically that challenging. It was just a unique take on something, right? So it lent itself really to, oh, this is my first startup. It doesn't require a bunch of capital. It doesn't require a bunch of people. It just requires some hustle. Fathom, on the other hand, is a very technical product. It took 5 senior engineers a year to get to version 1.
Oh, wow.
And because there's a lot of moving parts. There's real-time recording, there's transcription, there's real-time audio analysis, there's just a lot of moving parts to it. And so, I think that we kind of this time around, though, I was able to take that on because I was we can raise money from the get-go and and be able to invest in that and give ourselves kind of a bigger, a bigger target, right? In terms of what do we have to overcome this time? The biggest one is technical challenges. And the other one is really a lot of this product is integrations with other tools, most specifically Zoom. And so I remember we were 2 months in to Fathom, and Zoom announced this new Zoom app marketplace they were going to be launching. And I remember freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh. And they announced all here's the 30 companies that are going to be part of this. And I was we've been hacking something together with Zoom. And as soon as that came out, we're that is absolutely the right way to solve this problem. We have to find a way to get into that platform. I think the first half of the day, I was actually, oh my gosh, we're screwed. This platform came out and completely upends all of our plans, and we didn't know about it. How do we not know about it? And we're getting completely blindsided. The second half of the day, I was we have to get into this program. We have to find a way to get into Zoom. And so, we intentionally raised money from anyone connected to Zoom to try to get in there and get a bunch of connections. In the end, it actually came down to me just cold emailing the right guy at Zoom and being like, hey, here's what we're working on. I think it's a perfect fit for this program. And that got us into this program. And I was like, and they let us in, and they, we were one of 50 launch partners for this marketplace. And, it's a decently large number of 50, but you got to remember, I think we were like the only startup in that 50. Everything else was like a bunch of established companies that, Zoom had already had relationships with. Right. And then this random company Fathom. Right. And that random company Fathom is now the number one app in that app store, which is also what's crazy. Right. And so, but the adversity of the struggle this time was much more of like, I had to like, I don't know, work the network. Like we had to get a team that could work the technical side of things while I worked almost the like partnership side of things.
So when in doubt, send an email out.
Send a cold email. It's funny. I think I didn't even realize until recently that like the two most like important moments in my career came from cold emails, but they work. Like good ones work. And I was talking about this with some other pretty high profile like startup CEO friends, and we were kind of shocked how few people actually do that. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's lots of people that lazily send me a connection request on LinkedIn and then immediately like spam me with the like, do you want to hire me sort of thing. But like an actual email to my inbox that's thoughtful and reasonable, anytime I get one of those, I almost always respond. Right. I'll take like, because it's kind of a pay it forward type thing or pay it back. I'm not sure which direction we're going, but I think it's actually pretty underutilized.
Oh yeah, I mean, no, I totally. It's so funny, man. Every time I go on LinkedIn, I'll probably get like 7 different people. Hey, thanks for the friend request. Let me sell you this, and it's like, hey, take me out to dinner first, and then we could talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's a powerful tool if done right. Just everyone immediately wants to jump to the dessert, right? So I get it.
So if we were talking in 5 years, where do you see Fathom? Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
I mean, hopefully I've got a mailing address again. That's where I, hopefully I've established residence somewhere, and someone else is taking a risk on dating me. But outside of the personalized stuff, Fathom, we've started with this angle of it really sucks to try to talk to someone and type things out at the same time, right? Like this, and then in some ways we still will generate notes that can automatically generate and put in people's CRMs and wherever they need to go. But I fundamentally feel like note taking in general is just this weird. It's almost like when Netflix was sending out DVDs, right? It's like, well, we just want the video. I just want to watch the video. I don't need the DVD. The DVD is just like a means to an end, right? And so, I think there's a world where instead of companies having CRMs or having all these things where they, if you think about it, most people, the way companies understand their customers is by looking at their CRM and looking at the notes of like, well, what did all these people say about Rich as a customer? That's insane to me. Like if you think about how much data is lost between, I have 3 hours of conversations with a company. They've got 1 page of notes in their CRM about who I am. That's bananas. Right. And so I think Fathom, we're going to a place where we want to change the world so you can start understanding your customers from that original source. If I'm an executive, I'm a manager, I can go double click on Rich's latest feedback, Rich's concerns about their competition, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the user side, so that's kind of like how we think about like the world. But on the user side, I just think there's a lot of opportunities to make being on Zoom a lot easier and less stressful. So we started off with, we're going to help it so you don't have to take notes. We've expanded into things like it'll probably, if I was using Fathom right now, it would probably put up this warning and saying, hey, Rich, you're on a monologue. Well, you've been talking uninterrupted for 2 minutes, right? You should take a beat, right? And so we're looking at a lot of things like that. How can it, tell me my talk time, tell me that sort of thing. Tell me when the person's not paying attention, right? Where does Zoom fall flat compared to in person? Well, if I'm demoing you something in person, I can always tell when I've lost you, right? Because I've got all these cues. When you're a tiny little thumbnail in the corner of my screen, because I'm screen sharing, I can't tell if I really lost you, but can we use like computer vision to tell that like you're no longer paying attention and give me yet another warning? Hey, Rich, you need to ask a question, stop monologuing again and engage them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities where we can automate data entry post-call, automate research before the call, give you kind of like superpowers while you're on a Zoom call, and then give your management team, the executives of companies, this like way more granular and like informative view into what customers are saying about their product through the life cycle.
So right now it allows the user to I guess focus on the actual conversation. Yet in the future, it could almost be basically the host having a report card afterwards saying, hey, this is how many people are actually lost contact. That's how long you're doing it. So that's kind of basically the growth of it, or possible growth.
Yeah. We're doing some of this stuff today, the monologue stuff we do today. And we actually do it like in the meeting because there are a bunch of tools that'll tell you after the meeting, like, hey, Rich, you did a crappy job. And I was like, well, I want to know during the meeting, right? I want to be able to change my behavior. So I like my boss doesn't come down on me later and be like, hey, Rich, you talk too much. So yeah, we're post meeting, during the meeting, wherever we can find ways where the computer can be helpful to you and help you take things off your plate.
Well, thank you, Rich, for being here. And again, everyone listening, go in the show notes, look up Fathom. It's really simple. I mean, what's the best platform? I guess Fathom.video.com, right? So it is?
Yeah, Fathom.video that's the whole URL. If you actually go to Fathom.video/pod, that'll basically give you an invite code that'll let you skip to the front of the wait list. We have like a 50,000 person wait list. But if you follow that link, Fathom.video/pod, you'll immediately basically jump to the front of the line.
Perfect. Yeah. And it's really simple. They have it's like a 90-second video you can watch, or maybe it's a little bit longer, but it's really straightforward, really easy. So go there. I'm going to finish off with this last question, Rich. If you could talk to your younger self, that person that just got out of college, is there any kind of words of wisdom you'd provide to them?
I think it would be a joiner. I think early in my career, often I was like, this thing isn't exactly the right team or the right product or whatnot. I'm going to do my own thing. And I think my career really turned around as you heard, when I started finding ways to like either bring more people into what I'm working on, or more often it was, kind of sucking at my ego and joining someone else's venture, right? And seeing what I can learn from them. And so I think that's probably the thing where once I've been able to kind of suppress that ego, like I've had really great outcomes. So be a joiner.
Well, thank you again, Rich. I mean, you never know who you might know. And again, being a joiner, like Rich is talking about, I mean, you just put yourself out there, send the email, send the actual customized email, not a spam email, customized email. And basically you can get anywhere where you want to get to if it's customized, if it has some heart behind it. And you may never know, maybe email Rich and you could be part of his next adventure.
We'll see. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Please subscribe, please share, and go find Fathom. Bye, everyone.